social media, I have to tell you, please consider joining our Zoom room. There's so much fun and interaction going on. I mean, you'll definitely make some friends and just be able to connect with progressives all around the nation. It is truly a great time. To do that, all you have to do is just go to rrev.us/Zoom. Again, that is rrev.us/Zoom. And for those who are already in the chat, let us know your name, where you're from, and what is your favorite Halloween costume? Did you see a really particularly good one on social media or while you're out and about? Did you create one that's really great? Did someone dress up as a Boogeyman Joe Manchin? Who knows? Let us know. So I'm going to see who's all joining us. We have Hal from Maryland. We have David from Howard County, Maryland as well. Welcome, David. Of course, we got Erica from Central Illinois. Hal says he saw a dog with a lion's mane. Oh, that's such a classic. We have Kathleen from Arizona. We got Barry from Ohio. Roger from Oklahoma City. Oh, good seeing you, neighbor. And we have Mal from South Texas. Oh, I know you, Mal. Thank you so much for joining. Love seeing you here. Then, as we're letting this call build, I really want to urge everyone to check out the latest edition of the Revolution Report. That is our weekly newsletter delivered right to your inbox every Saturday and Monday. And what's great about this, there's no corporate spin going on here. It is pure progressive news, the facts, what is happening on the ground everywhere. Because while the corporate media might make it sound like we're having an interesting time, the fact of the matter is we are organizing everywhere. We got boots on the ground going on. And if you want to learn what's happening, sign up for the Revolution Report, and also make sure you share it with a friend. Let's spread the progressive gospel around. And again, for everyone joining us, put your name in the chat, put where you're from, and put your favorite Halloween costume. I think one of my favorites is one person dressed up as Ted Cruz and another person dressed up as his dog Snowflake while he was leaving Texas back in the winter storm. So let's see what we got. We got Amanda Nicholas said she's also dressed up as a scary Kristen Cinema, giving a thumbs down. Well, ain't that a definitely horrifying thought? We have Karen from Philly, David from Orange, California. Welcome, David. So we got people from coast to coast, quite literally. We have Jacqueline from South Carolina. We got Anna Marta from New Jersey, Lee from California. As I'm telling you, folks, we are a true national movement. What other national movements do you see have so many folks from all over the place? And Andy as well of Cantoon Cruise and Snowflake. Now, again, thank you all for joining us. Before we really get going, it's really important to remind everyone that our revolution is 100% funded by you, our members. We are funded by we, the people, not they, the corporations and their foundations. And over the last 5 years, we've become America's leading grassroots funded political action organization. And with all of you, we are fighting corporate power and working to deliver on progressive policies that will change lives. So if you are already a member, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate you. We love you, what you're doing. You make everything that we do possible. If you're not a member yet, well, I think now is a great time to become one. We get these Our Revolution membership cards. I got mine right here, and it has everything that we're about. It has our healthcare, our student issues and education. And of course, to get that, we'll have to get voting rights, which is something we're really fighting for. So if you want to get your handy dandy membership card, and I'm telling you, these are going to be limited edition. These 2021s, you will show these off later on and say, I helped stop fascism in America. That is what we'll be able to say. This is what this means. These are very rare collective items. And you can get one by going to rrev.us/2021 member. Again, that is rrev.us/2021 member. If you're in the Zoom room, that should be in the chat. If you are on the phone, press *3 and talk to an operator. They'll get your information. Speaking of the Zoom room chat, please, everyone, join the Zoom room chat. That is where all the action's going on. We got folks sharing their favorite costumes right now. So, if you are watching on social media, on the phone, I'm afraid y'all won't be able to see this. You have to join the Zoom room. You have to join the chat. And, that's where you can connect with us, ask your questions, and so forth. So to do that, all you have to do is go to rrev.us/Zoom. Again, that is rrev.us/Zoom. And, again, just want to really welcome folks. We'll be getting started very, very soon. We are going to have some really exciting folks join us. We will be having Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon, Andrea King Waters, president of the Drum Major Institute, Ben Jealous, president of People for the American Way, and a Texas fan favorite down here, Texas State Representative Ana Maria Ramos, who's been really leading the fight in all the voter suppression going on down here in Texas. So, and all these folks have really been leading the way on fighting for votes and democracy and our fundamental human rights and everything else. So for those, again, for folks who are joining over the phone or on social media, really have to emphasize, go to our Zoom room, rrev.us/Zoom. And without further ado, let's get this show on the road. So I'm going to pass the hat to my good friend, Aaron Chappell. He is our political and legislative director. Aaron, take it away.
Hey, thanks so much, Clayton. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this special town hall call on voting rights. As Clayton said, I'm Aaron Chappell. I'm the legislative and political director here at Our Revolution. And tonight I'm co-hosting with our membership director, Marissa Moormill. So in just a bit, we're going to go over how we're escalating the next phase of our fight for voting rights, and also the focus on the filibuster that goes along with it. But first, here on the eve of an election day, we're also going to give you a big update on the battle over the budget.
Thanks, Aaron. The Congressional Progressive Caucus held the line again this week, thwarting a second attempt by Democratic leadership to pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill without a budget bill. United against the vote, House progressives kept two bills tied together and kept the bipartisan bill as leverage and kept the fight for the budget bill alive. In the $1.75 trillion budget framework released on Thursday, the $1.75 trillion budget framework released on Thursday is the floor, not the ceiling. And we'll be honest, it's a far cry from what we'd like to see and ultimately get passed. But without our activism and strategic inside-outside organizing, and the corporatist beloved bipartisan bill is all that would have passed, leaving no shot at any social spending at all.
That's right, Marissa. So at this moment, Democrats still have an opportunity to really deliver on this budget bill. We have a small window to impact the final version as it moves through the Senate. And that's why we're pushing Biden to use the power of the presidency to get his Senate, his party, to pass a bill with more of his agenda, our priorities as well, left intact. The American people demand these programs. They're very popular, and so does the Democratic Party. So they've got to deliver while they've got the power, just to begin to restore the faith of voters by doing this and to avoid a total slaughter in the midterms next year.
That's so true. And as Bernie would say, what's in the damn bill? And through our work, we've managed to secure some major pieces like universal pre-K, climate investment, taxes on the wealthy, and penalties for union busting. And Our Revolution played a direct role in getting the end to the $86 billion fossil fuel subsidies into the framework. But we'd be lying if we said we weren't satisfied, but we're not giving up.
So I'm sure you've heard about the fight over Medicare expansion in this budget. We're pushing hard for Medicare to cover dental and vision, not just hearing aids. That means really expanding public health care, taking a real step toward a goal of Medicare for all. A truly transformational budget package would also, of course, have to include drug price negotiations through Medicare, ending the rest of the fossil fuel subsidies that we're not getting at already, guaranteed paid family medical leave. None of this is final yet, so there's still time to push with our outside support. Bernie and House progressives are working overtime. They want those priorities back in, and they're fighting big pharma, big oil, and all the politicians who serve them.
And Our Revolution has been going to the mat for our priorities in this bill, protesting around the country, getting arrested on Capitol Hill, bird dogging obstructionist Dems where we find them, and we're not stopping now. To pass the New Deal style legislation, we need New Deal style majorities in Congress. For both, we need to keep building our powerful movement and ramping up the organizing on the outside.
Exactly. And that's what we're doing tomorrow in exciting down ballot elections all across the country. We've got members out knocking on doors, phone banking, getting out the vote to grow grassroots progressive control of local governments across the country. We've made over 350,000 voter contacts. We've got candidates running from Massachusetts to Florida, Minnesota to Washington State, Virginia, New Jersey, Ohio, in between.
And tomorrow evening, we'll be rooting for our endorsed progressives like our mayoral candidates, India Walton in Buffalo, and Michelle Wu in Boston, and Justin Bibb in Cleveland, looking to clinch the top executive spots in major American cities. And on the city council side, our revolution has endorsed a host of candidates from Richie Floyd in St. Petersburg, Florida, to Jeremiah Ellison in Minneapolis, to a slate in New York City that would be make the council the most progressive and diverse legislative body ever, to include Felicia Singh, who could flip one of the last Republican seats on the council.
So there's incredible opportunities in tomorrow's election. But for any of this to work, it's predicated on making sure everyone can vote. We know the GOP strategy to remain in power relies on voter suppression. Republicans are going to block voting rights legislation. And you all already know this. When we surveyed this summer, we saw that voting rights came out as a top issue in importance to our Revolution members and supporters. So that's why we're holding another voting rights town hall tonight and previewing a massive set of actions we've got planned for November, because we've got to escalate this fight. So we're putting a couple chats in the links in the chat right now for some of those events, and we'll be talking about them later.
And since our last voting rights town hall, our Revolution members and our allies were arrested at the White House, calling President Biden to fix or nix the filibuster to pass crucial voting rights legislation. And among those arrested were our Revolution Executive Director, Joseph Urias, and Civil Rights Leader, Ben Jealous, who we'll be hearing from later in this call. The next day, Biden announced his support to carve out an exception for the filibuster on voting rights, and maybe more. Our Revolution activists have been hitting the road on a pickup tour across Arizona to pestering Senator Kyrsten Sinema to support the filibuster reform so that we can finally stop Republican obstruction of the voting rights and other critical legislation like the PRO Act.
So with that in mind, we've got a great lineup of folks tonight who are all on the front lines in this battle against the GOP war on voting. If you're on the phone, you can press *3, put questions for your guests, for our guests to the operator, or in the chat if you're in Zoom. You'll be hearing from Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon, Ben Jealous, Texas State Representative Ana Maria Ramos, and Andrea Waters King.
We want to thank our members for being with us every step of the way in the fight for our voting rights. And for those of you that aren't yet members, you can jump on this fight right now and help make a difference. You can become a movement builder today by signing up in the link in the chat. That's rrev.us/2021 member. And if you're joining us by phone, you can press *3 and an operator can take down your information. Once you sign up, if you're on Zoom, please tell us about it in the chat.
So just 2 weeks ago, Mitch McConnell and his gang in the GOP filibustered the Freedom to Vote Act, just as they did the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act before that. To tell us a little bit more about this, we're going to welcome our first guest for the evening, Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley, lead sponsor of the For the People Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. Again, if you're on the phones, press *3 to submit a question to Senator Merkley. Everyone else, pop your questions in the Zoom chat. So, Senator Merkley, it is great to have you back. You are a relentless champion on this issue. You were just on our call in September, gearing up for that vote on the Freedom to Vote Act. Can you tell us what happened after?
Sure, you bet. Hey, thank you very much. This sort of grassroots organizing is just essential to getting anything done. And I was thinking about how you had the list of things there on healthcare, housing, education, good paying jobs, and we could add climate chaos, Equality Act. And the only reason we have a shot at any of it is we have 50 votes in the Senate. The reason that it's a challenge to get it done is because we have 50 votes in the Senate. But what if we had 49? What if we had 48? And think about the impact that the rigged election laws will have. We now have 33 laws that have been passed in 19 states to rig the election, to make it harder for people, for targeted groups to get to the ballot box. And you don't have to have that big of impact if you basically make it harder to vote before Election Day, and with all sorts of restrictions on vote by mail and early voting. And then on Election Day, you understaff the precincts that you want people to not vote at. You put out false information about them. You put them where there's no parking. You put defective equipment in there. You would send intimidators down to intimidate people in line. you can make a huge difference in the outcome. And that's what 1965 was all about. So how is it that we're here in the year 2021 and across the nation, Republicans are gearing up racist laws to block targeted groups of Black Americans, Native Americans, Latino Americans from voting? It's pretty incredulous, and we have to stop it. And that means we have to pass the freedom to vote. And as you know, I think about how it was June 22nd that we voted on the motion to proceed to For the People. And then we had another vote in September, so 3 months later, on a modified version of For the People that incorporated some of the amendments that we had done, proposed in committee, the manager's amendment. And then it was October 20th, and that's 4 months after the first vote that we had a vote to proceed to the freedom to vote, which is the one that we worked on to get the 50th Democrat on, because we had 49 on the original bill. And I praise Senator Manchin was engaged. We met multiple times over the summer, a group of 8 of us. We worked through every provision. And then we added a bunch of provisions on election subversion, responding to those laws in those 19 states. So the bill, in that sense, takes on a critical aspect the original For the People didn't have. So another piece of it is John Lewis. John Lewis is not in freedom to vote. We're going to vote Wednesday, 2 days from now, on a motion to proceed to that. And we anticipate that we'll have 51 votes if Lisa Murkowski joins us, and it sounds like she's going to, but not 60. So again, we have this veto that was introduced in 1975 that said you have to have 60 votes to close debate. And so it doesn't matter if those who want more debate, they don't have to show up. They don't have to debate. It's no show, no effort, obstruction, a no show, no effort, veto. Well, that is just paralyzing our ability to act. We're at this hinge point between the vision of authoritarian government around the world. And China's out there saying, hey, our system, our authoritarian system works better. It's more efficient in getting things done. Well, we believe in the power of the people and the voice of the people to shape our destiny, our future. But if our machinery is broken, that's a myth, not a reality. It's a source of cynicism, not success. So we've got to fix that machinery. And that means the machinery in the Senate, we have to restore, and I like the words restore the filibuster, because it's okay, and in fact, a good thing to have a minority that can slow things down so a bill can be read by the public, a bill can be read by the press, a bill can be vetted by the senators themselves. It's a good thing to slow things down if you're seeking an amendment or you're seeking compromise, but not a veto. In other words, a cooling saucer, that metaphorical phrase that supposedly Washington said, but I guess he didn't actually say it for the Senate. A cooling saucer, fine. A deep freeze, no. So we've got to fix or restore the filibuster so they can slow things down, but not veto things. And that is the vision that a group of us have been working on. We hope we will have a full group of 50 senators to endorse that vision. The other alternative, as mentioned, is a carve-out. A carve-out on voting rights, if that's what's required to get it done, sign me up. But I think the Senate is better in fixing the system so we can also have deliberation, but ultimately a simple majority vote on reproductive rights to respond to Texas, on labor rights with the PRO Act, so workers can organize and thereby get better wages and better conditions, on climate, so we can get climate done, because if it's 60 votes to get climate policy done, then climate policy won't get done. Yes, we can do things with money like we are in the Build Back Better bill. That's good, but we really have to have a functioning Senate. And our founders knew it. Our founders were under a supermajority paralysis under the Confederation Congress when they wrote our Constitution. And they said, don't do this. Madison said, don't do this. It will invert the very premise of democratic governments because the minority will decide things instead of the majority. And Hamilton said, don't do it because it will be the result of pernicious activities and tedious delays and contemptible compromise. And so let's fix the Senate and let's pass this voting rights bill, freedom to vote. And it's not just defending the ballot box. It is also stopping billionaires from buying elections. It's also stopping the gerrymandering that we see in Georgia and Texas going on right now. Gerrymandering on steroids that will increase a 15-vote advantage in the House of Representatives to a 25-vote advantage in the House of Representatives, totally shattering the premise of equal representation. So those are my thoughts. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you, because only with your pressure are we going to get this done.
Thank you so much, Senator. And yeah, that's all sounds exactly right. How, we've seen the president change his rhetoric slightly in the last weeks around the filibuster. When you were last with us, we understood the big difference was Joe Manchin's involvement in the new bill, the Freedom to Vote Act now. What else, what's the plan here to move to get those 50 Democrats together to actually take action? And what can we, everybody here on the phone tonight, do as well?
You bet. So the set of strategies were Senator Manchin wanted to see if Republicans would join us on freedom to vote. We tried. Then he wanted to see if they could join us on John Lewis, and we have one, but we think we have one, but not 10. So there's a version of it that we understand as of tonight. Lisa Murkowski has signed on to proceed to the floor. Of course, it won't actually make it to the floor because it will take 60. So the question of can we get a bill that will get 60 votes to save our democracy succeed? And the answer is no, we're not going to get 60 votes. Republicans at the Senate, unlike Republicans across America, they don't like the idea of billionaires buying election. They don't like the idea of blocking the ballot box. But the higher you go up in the leadership chain, the more and more they're committed to doing this because they start to play the game of power. And how can they hold on to power? How can they increase their power? How can they undermine? And there's no principle of we are going to defend the right to vote. It's about its power. And it's really government for the powerful versus the people. And we see democracies compromised all over the world with changes in the Constitution, manipulation, the opponents are locked up in jail, the media is controlled. And what we're seeing here is a version of the corruption of democracy that is also about the powerful taking over. And so we have to stop it. So now that plan of can we get Republicans of principle to join us? The answer is no. So the answer is we have to get rid of the blockade at the motion to proceed. So, and by the way, that was essentially never used in our history before that 1975 rule change. So, because why should you use a filibuster to promote debate that actually blocks debate by keeping something from getting to the floor? So you get rid of that. At the same time, we should guarantee amendments so that both sides can once again have amendments as they did when I first saw the Senate in the 70s and 80s. And then with both sides able to amend in a fair process on the floor, we need to say, fine, there's some version of we have a two-speech rule in our rules that was designed to say, yes, everybody can speak and make their opinion heard. We want to hear from everyone, but eventually we have to get to a vote. So it would be some version of that, some version of the public filibuster, the talking filibuster, or it'll be a carve out. And that's, quite frankly, is going to depend on what my colleagues from Arizona and West Virginia are willing to do.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Senator. We are going to be out in the streets and fighting doing everything we can with the hope that you'll be back on this call soon, celebrating a victory on this issue. We can't lose,
We cannot lose. Thank you. Thanks
so much. Marissa, over to you.
Thanks, Aaron. Thank you, Senator Merkley. So we want to thank our members for being with us every step of the way in this fight for voting rights. And for all of you that are not members yet, you can jump into this fight right now and help make a difference and become a movement builder today by signing up in the link in the chat. That's rrev.us/2021 member. And if you're joining us by phone, you can press *3 and operator will take down your information. And once you sign up, tell us about it in the chat. We have already received several pledges from folks on the phones. So we are excited and thank you so much for joining this fight. Up next, I'd like to welcome our next guest, Andrea Waters King, the president of the Drum Major Institute. Real quick, if you're on the phones, again, you can press *3 to submit any questions that you might have. Everyone else who's joining us by Zoom, please put your questions in the chat. Andrea, welcome. We're so glad to have you with us tonight, organizing around this vital issue.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Can you tell us about some of the key components that you'd like to see as part of this comprehensive voting rights package?
Absolutely. But first off, let me just give you a little bit of background information because I think it informs the entire discussion on our organization, the Drum Major Institute, Drum Majors for Change. Because the last sermon that my father-in-law, Martin Luther King Jr., ever gave at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia, was entitled The Drum Major Instinct. And in that sermon, he talked about all of us having the propensity and to be drum majors for peace, justice, and equity. And that he talked about after his death that he did not want to be remembered for all of his accolades or for all of the awards that he received, but he wanted to be remembered as a drum major for peace, for justice, and equity. And Coretta Scott King, his wife, were so moved by that particular sermon that 2 months later, when they were putting together his funeral and they were arranging the entire program, she decided to put that sermon, an excerpt from that sermon, played at the funerals and at that point, Martin Luther King Jr. eulogized himself with those words. And we feel at the Drum Major Institute, that call is our pursuit. And there is no more timely issue than the right to the protection and the right of voting in 2021. Earlier this year, actually just a couple of months ago, the Drum Major Institute, along with a couple of other partners, we actually coordinated marches on the 50th anniversary of the I Have a Dream speech. And on that day, we had nearly 100 marches in 41 states with a diverse coalition. Probably many of you all on the call participated in your communities in these marches standing for voting rights and the protection of voting rights. Because as we all know, just since January of this year, last year there was this massive organization and organizing around getting people to vote, which we did and which was successful. And then actually because of that, this year, since January alone, almost 500 pieces of legislation have been proposed in this country, and 19 states have passed already this legislation that actually is making it harder for Black and Brown communities to register to vote, to cast a vote, and also to have their votes counted. So we have been working on this issue, and we will continue to work on this issue. We've been on Capitol Hill several times. We've been to the Senate. We actually also are participating this Wednesday in front of the White House in a direct action to continue to pressure the executive branch of the administration to use its full power. We just heard about the filibuster and, actually should it be a carve out or elimination? Last year there was a awakening not only in this country, but around the world. And in that awakening, a lot of relics of white supremacy were actually literally came down. But the filibuster is one of the most powerful relics of white supremacy that's still standing. And if you really understand the history of it, if you look how over 100 years ago, the laws, anti-lynching laws that actually were blocked using the filibuster, how during the 60s, during the civil rights era, the filibuster was used to block civil rights legislation. And so here we are in 2021, and we're still going around the same circle. But we do have hope. This movement has always been a movement of faith. And what I mean by faith is when it's darkest, we look for the stars. And time again, I like to say that the baton really has been passed to a new generation. And the eternal flames of peace, justice, and equity have to be, it's a flame of justice that each generation has to contribute to put logs into that fire so that flame will continue to burn. And we have seen that. We saw when we saw all the people to come out August 28th all around this country, and how people have continued to come out since that point. We've been back to DC several times, and we've participated in coalition work with a lot of great, the DFAD coalition out of DC, and a lot of great organizations. So we know that this issue is something that people are every single day working on. And with that, we know ultimately that we will be successful.
That's right. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the rollbacks that you're seeing in Georgia and other places?
Well, here in Georgia in particular, it's you're seeing the reduction in days of early voting. You're seeing the reduction of drop boxes. You're seeing the reduction of precincts being closed. And it's very interesting that they are being closed in, again, predominantly Black and brown communities. And with all of these, and all of this creates longer lines, consequently. And now here in the state of Georgia, it's illegal to even pass out water in the sweltering heat in the long lines that these laws actually created. And after all of that, if all else fails, there actually is an oversight committee put in place that it can effectively overturn the results of elections.
It's horrible to hear of all those things. And can you talk about what it would mean for, this voting rights legislation to pass? What would that mean in terms of direct impact for voters and being able to make their voices heard in our political system?
Well, the very first thing is that we just heard about the gerrymandering. So, this federal voting legislation is critical because it is at this point the only recourse that could supersede all of these state laws that we are seeing being proposed and all too often passed. If there is federal oversight, federal legislation, which we had up until 2013 with the Voting Rights Act, which was overturned by the Supreme Court in 2013. It's interesting that a lot of the senators that are voting against federal legislation now voted many times for the renewal of the Voting Rights Act. But the Freedom to Vote Act and John Lewis Voting Rights Act would give oversight to communities that are experiencing these restrictions and to voting.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Is there anything else that you want to leave? Let our listeners know about upcoming events or anything else?
There are ongoing events. This is a long-running campaign on so many great organizations. I know that there is a website that is launching freedomtovoteaction.org that will have updated information and ways in which people can get involved. I believe that starting next week, there's going to be activities where people can literally host in their own communities and connect with others. And you can go to freedomtovoteaction.org to sign up and find out how to get involved in your community.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate all of your insight about everything going on in Georgia and all the work that you're doing to help advance the voting rights.
Thank you all. Thank you.
All right. So next, I want to give a big welcome to our next guest, Texas State Rep Ana Maria Ramos, who's on the front lines of the fight against Republicans and draconian anti-voter laws. And for our folks on the phones, if you have any questions for Representative Ramos, please press *3. And anyone else, please pop your questions into the chat. So welcome, Ana Maria. Thank you so much for being with us. And can you tell us a little bit about what these laws are doing to voters in Texas?
Thank you so much for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to join our revolution. These voting laws, what they are doing in Texas, the truth is, and the Republicans know this, it's not stopping any fraud, considering there is no fraud, substantive fraud here in the state and really in any state in the country. But what it is doing is attempting to stop voting. And that's where the impact is going to be, especially considering we are a majority minority state. And that's the issue, right? That is the biggest concern for Republicans, is that they don't want to walk into the Capitol and see somebody like me, or even somebody like you, or somebody like probably 95%, or maybe even all of the current listeners right now. They don't want young folk. They don't want brown folk. They don't want women. They don't want to include this whole community of what the real America looks like. They don't want to include us in the conversation. And what they want to do is maintain the status quo, right? The male-dominated white privilege that has always been the shot callers. Well, our population and our people look different today. And in fact, in Texas, even during the pandemic, right, this last election, it was one of our highest voter turnouts in our history. So imagine that during a pandemic where here in Texas, they made us go to the polls. There really weren't a lot of provisions to help people avoid others and requiring social distancing and such, considering our governor here is a gem, right? Even through all of that, making it difficult for our people, we had a really great turnout, and they didn't like that. So that's why they introduced this legislation to stop that from happening again.
Yeah, that's horrible. All the stuff that's happening in on the ground in Texas. I just wanted to also give Rep. Ramos a quick, shout out for being the Texas House Progressive Caucus whip as well. I forgot to mention before. Also, so just what you were saying, like this is just showing, case in point, why we need to stop these laws from spreading around the country and how people are. And how are people feeling on the ground, and what can be done to fight back on this?
Well, people are really upset. I mean, just the senator was mentioning the anti-woman bill, and many of us probably followed that today being heard at the Supreme Court. People are really upset. And in addition to where we are today with the illegal and unethical gerrymandering that the Republicans just passed here in Texas, it's almost like you're living an episode of The Handmaid's Tale. It's like, wow, there's never enough to satiate their greed and their hunger for power. There will never be enough, but we are fighting back. And I'm encouraged because we've had community events and talking to the people. And what is wonderful about all of this, if you can, I'm a person who likes to look at silver lining. And what's happening now because of this egregious power grab that the Republicans have just kind of lost all sense of reality and are in their own silos, that it's waking other people up. Historically in Texas, and during the 2018 election, we had about 500,000 registered voters who didn't show up at the polls. Well, these people are waking up. If they didn't show, and unfortunately, Beto lost. But we were able to flip 12 seats in the Texas House. So people are paying attention. I just this past weekend ran into several individuals who are like, I voted Republican in the past, but this is nonsense. I don't know what they're doing. What is Abbott doing? We've done nothing to fix the grid. And so they're waking up because you know what? When we have a freeze, the freeze doesn't say, are you Republican or Democrat? It's just, you're going to freeze and your lights are going to be out. It doesn't matter what party you're from. And they're feeling this. The 70,000 deaths that we've had in Texas due to COVID, it has nothing to do with your party, but it has everything to do with the leaders and the policymakers who are negligent in encouraging the spread to happen and really leading to the deaths of 70,000 Texans. So people are paying attention. Unfortunately, it's taken us it's taken this much pain for a lot of voters to feel that maybe they did wrong by voting for Republicans in the past, and they're looking at other options and then waking up our younger folk too.
Yes. Well, is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with, or any other calls to actions that our folks should hear from voices down in Texas?
Yes, what I want to encourage everybody, and even if you're not in Texas, wherever you're at, because democracy is under attack in all of our country. Democracy is definitely under attack, and so We often talk about registering people to vote. I mean, how do we preserve voting rights? Definitely through legislation and what we're doing at the federal and at the state levels and continuing to fight. And I want to thank a lot of your state legislators for visiting us in DC when we were out there breaking quorum. We felt your love. We felt the love of the country. But we have to continue to fight. And it's not just registering people to vote, but they mentioned, your previous speakers mentioned, polling places, longer waiting lines. How do we address that? We have to be strategic. I volunteered as a poll watcher when I was 18. I had just registered to vote. I didn't really know all the ins and outs, but I knew that that's where power lied, right? In the voice of the people. So I showed up, and through years, 20 years now, I've learned more and more. And so what I say to your viewers and to your listeners is, go out and not only, find out about how to register to vote, but get your friends to the polls. But in addition to that, become a poll watcher. Sign up to be an election clerk. Take the day off every year. Every time we're going to have voting, every 2 years, take the day off. Go ahead and ask for time off now. So for November, if you have to. But we need you at the polls, whether it's poll greeting on the outside, taking your friends to the polls, or being an election worker. That's one thing that I've always done since I was 18, is on election year, whether it's midterm or the presidential, that day, election day, I'm taking off, because I know that I can be of good use to protecting our democracy, whatever that looks like. So I encourage all of your viewers and listeners to do that tomorrow. If you go in, or next month, or the beginning of next year, tell your boss, hey, I have to be out of work on election day because I'm going, give me a sick day. I'm going to bill to that, whatever I need to do, but I'm going to be at the polls and I'm going to be protecting our democracy. So that is my call to action to all of you. And thank you for continuing to be part of the fight.
Thank you so much for joining us, Representative Ramos. And that is such an important message with Election Day being tomorrow. We need to make sure as many people get out to vote, and there are opportunities throughout the country with our revolution and others. So thank you again for joining us. And I'm going to kick it over to Aaron.
Thank you.
Thanks, Representative Ramos and Marissa. And yeah, everybody get out tomorrow for Election Day. We want to also thank you all who are members, who are supporting this work. We're getting some great signups on the phones tonight. For if you're not a member of our revolution yet, you can jump in the fight now, help support this work, become a movement builder today. You can sign up at ourrev.us/2021 member, or on the phones, press *3. Once you sign up, tell us about it in the chat too. We like to hear. So next up, we've got Ben Jealous, president of People for the American Way, among many hats he's worn. A reminder, if you've got questions you want to submit to Ben, press *3 on the phones, or just pop them in chat. We've got people monitoring the chat there. So Ben, welcome. We last just saw you in front of the White House a couple weeks ago. You and our executive director, Joseph Givargis, got arrested together at an action we were holding. And then the same week, the president changed his story and came out in support of an exception to the filibuster for voting rights and maybe more, he said. So how do we keep building?
Thank you, Aaron. It's great to be here. It's nice to be talking to folks at Our Revolution as the founding national treasurer of the organization. It's nice to see it thriving. Back in August, Joe Biden said that you can't stop the people from voting. It was his last CNN town hall before the one that you referenced. It was ahistorical. State voter suppression laws have always been able to stop people from voting. My grandmother turns 105 this November. She knew her grandfather like I know her. Her grandfather was one of the last Blacks to serve in the Virginia legislature before the end of Reconstruction. He lived with the pain of having watched his colleagues vote to suppress voters, but those that had elected him, in order to ensure that men like him would not serve again in that century, and not indeed until past the midpoint of the next century in the Virginia legislature. She inherited that pain. And that pain is testament to the fact that laws like the laws that we see now in Georgia, in Texas, in Arizona, and all across this country, states all across this country, are capable of suppressing votes in massive proportions. Now, I, with the support of Our Revolution, ran for governor of Maryland. I was the Democratic nominee 4 years ago. And I get calls now from people of color who have been planning, very talented, very qualified people of color, have been planning to run. Democrats have been planning to run. States like Georgia and Texas and Arizona who are considering not running because their state legislatures have given themselves the power to overturn the results of the election. And so we're outside the White House, Joseph and I last week or 2 weeks ago getting arrested because the only antidote, the only true antidote to state level voter suppression laws is federal voting rights legislation. And the only way that's going to get through is if there's a carve out in the filibuster or one of the other changes that Senator Merkley discussed. And the only way that that happens is if the president himself calls for it. That's what Donald Trump did most recently to pack the Supreme Court with far right-wing justices. He called on his party to create a carve out in the filibuster to get it done. Well, if Donald Trump can call for a carve out in the filibuster to pack the Supreme Court, then Joe Biden can certainly do it to save our democracy. And that's what's at stake. What's at stake right now is literally our democracy. Think of how brazen it is for a state legislature to give itself the power to ultimately overturn the people in the next gubernatorial election in their state. And yet in state after state after state, that is precisely what's happening. This is why Bernie founded Our Revolution. Coming out of the 2016 campaign, we could see, I can remember being in the Ozarks with Bernie and him putting out the call for the police to stop killing unarmed Black women and unarmed Black men. And honestly, I didn't know how that was going to go. And then all of a sudden, half the men in deer hunting camouflage were up in their chairs with their fists in the air, hollering in solidarity. That's what our revolution is about. That's why we founded it. It's about that solidarity between working people of all colors across this country to fight a fascist movement that we could see coming in the Ozarks. That was like in March of 2016. When many people in the establishment were still encouraging folks to vote for Trump in the primary because they thought that he'd be the easiest one for Hillary to beat. Little did they understand what was actually happening in this country. And so that's why we're asking each of you to go to pfaw.org/no more excuses, www.pfaw.org/no more excuses. If you can be in the DMV on this Wednesday or any Wednesday this month, you can sign up to get arrested with us. You can sign up to be there with us. And if you can't, you can get social media actions. Again, pfaw.org/no more excuses. You can get social media actions you can take. You can get instructions for how to call the White House and demand that Joe Biden call on the Senate to remove any obstacle to passing voting rights legislation now. Let's be clear. If this doesn't happen by the end of the year, it has no impact on redistricting. We need to pass the Freedom to Vote Act now. We need to make sure the filibuster's out of the way of the John Lewis bill. So please join us. Again, thank you to Joseph. Thank you to Our Revolution. Couldn't be more proud as a co-founder of this organization to see you guys fully engaged in this fight for voting rights.
It's great to have you back here, Ben. So I'm sorry that it has to be, talking about a story like this in 2021. It's almost unbelievable, right? But this is the strategy then that you're laying out. We have to put pressure on the president to bring this home. That's the only way we're going to get this.
It's the only way that it's going to happen, and it's time. For the last year, Our Revolution members, People for the American Way members, NAACP members, LULAC members have been out in front of the Congress, out in front of the Senate. Kamala Harris has done her job. She's the vice president, the president of the Senate. 51 Democrats agree. The Freedom to Vote Act needs to be passed. The John Lewis bill needs to be passed. And it only takes 51 votes to create a carve out in the filibuster. We've got to be comfortable using power when we have it, or we could literally lose our democracy. And that's why we've built this movement, to make sure that we get back, quite frankly, to using our power for the benefit of the people. A democracy is not a democracy unless all of us can vote. And that's what's a threat. That's what's being threatened right now.
So we've got a great series of actions coming up at the White House. it's a strategy that really resonates after what we've just been through in the budget battle. We know how hard it is directly ourselves in the streets to move Senator Manchin. But moving the president is clearly a reasonable approach to take in this matter. We'll be sharing links for those actions. There's also going to be distributed actions next week that we'll share for those of you that can't get here in DC. You said there's also some social media actions for those.
Exactly. pfaw.org/no more excuses. Let me also say this. It is super meaningful that the Kings will be with us, that they have joined this movement, that they're co-conveners of this movement. Martin Luther King III, it was his father who went to Lyndon Baines Johnson and said, we need the Voting Rights Act. And Lyndon Baines Johnson said, I've used up all my capital. I've got to focus on the economy. We can't get it done. And yet the movement made LBJ find a way to get it done. And that's what Martin Luther King III represents in this movement. We're partnered in this with the League of Women Voters. The last time that the women of the League were outside of a White House getting arrested, it was actually their predecessor organization outside of Woodrow Wilson's White House. When you have Martin Luther King III, when you have the League of Women Voters getting arrested outside of your White House, which is the plan this Wednesday, please join us if you can. My teenage daughter is going to be getting arrested out there too. Martin Luther King's only grandchild, Martin III's daughter, 13 years old, plans to get arrested as well. Why? Because we were talking to our daughters about what we plan to do. And they said, well, Dad, like you're trying to secure our voting rights because we're going to be voting in a few years. We want to get arrested too. And so I talked to Martin. We're like, okay, fine. Girls can come too. This is absolutely about them. And who are we to tell them not to raise their voices? And so please, a 13-year-old granddaughter, Martin Luther King, getting arrested for the first time outside of Joe Biden's White House. Please join her. Please join my daughter. Please join Joseph and all of us. We need you there to send a signal. And if you're in the DMV, if you're in Virginia, and it'll be the day after your election, if you're in DC, and please make sure you're turning out everybody, Youngkin is no joke. He's not to be underestimated how far right-wing them is. So please turn out for Terry McAuliffe if you're in Virginia. But this is the day after. Please join us. DC, please join us. Maryland, please join us. We are closer to the Capitol, and we have a responsibility to all those folks in Arizona and Texas and Georgia who can't get there easily to show up. We've seen more pastors so far come from Georgia than from Maryland to these voting rights protests. We need you there. If you can be there, be there. And what great cocktail conversation at Thanksgiving, to be able to tell folks you got arrested with Martin Luther King's only grandchild. It's 13 years old. So please join us.
So I hope you're listening, DMV. We know we've got a lot of people in Virginia and Maryland here in the district. Our own, the chair of our board, Larry Cohen, is going to be out with us this Wednesday, risking arrest as well. Very excited to have him coming out on Wednesday. We'll be there this Wednesday. We'll be there next Wednesday, and we'll be there the Wednesday after, Ben. So everybody who's listening who can join us, we hope to see you there. We're going to be calling you. We're going to be texting you to get you out to join us.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you to Paco and Joseph and the whole team. Y'all are doing a great job.
Thanks so much. Marissa, back to you.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Ben, for joining us. And thank you all for getting in this fight. And if you haven't become a member, please become a member and help us take another step towards fighting for voting rights. And you can jump in right now by going to rrev.us/2021 member. And if you're on the phones, you can press *3 and an operator will take down your information. So thank you all that have joined as a member, and for all those that are considering it now. And tomorrow is election day across the. Sorry, I think I'm on the wrong slide.
Well, all over the country, right?
There we go. Yes, tomorrow is election day all over the country, and we are going to see our candidates that are going to be up for India Walton in Buffalo, Justin Bibb in Cleveland, and Michelle Wu in Boston.
And much more, of course. So we hope you'll be out getting out the vote tomorrow, getting out to vote yourself, bringing your friends and family and neighbors and the rest of the Our Revolution network. We're also going to be, as we just said, joining Ben and Larry Cohen at the White House on the 3rd. We're putting that link in the chat right now. There's potential for civil disobedience there as well, if you want to sign up, in addition to just showing up. And again, on the 10th and again on the 17th, until we get this done. As Ben said, this is the last chance. We've got to get voting rights done this year, as you've heard from everyone on this call. We'll also be sharing, for those of you who can't be here in person in DC, a series of distributed actions around the country. We're looking for hosts or for people who can join actions that are scheduled. That's at freedomtovoteactions.org, and that link will be shared in the chat. So the rest of you can take part in this critical movement.
And also on the 3rd, you can join Our Revolution Maryland at 7 p.m. for Maryland Green New Deal Town Hall. State Senator Arthur Ellis and Lower Shore's Jared Schleiven will be discussing how Maryland's $2.5 billion tax revenue surplus can be used to invest in green infrastructure projects. You can go to the link in the chat if you're interested in joining.
And you can join Our Revolution New Jersey and the nurses campaign to win Medicare for All. They're having a car caravan as part of a national day of action this coming Saturday, November 6th. Representative Albio Cyrus has been identified as one of the 4 top priorities of the national Medicare for All movement. So we believe that with a little extra pressure, Representative Cyrus could be moved to support Medicare for All legislation, become another co-sponsor of that critical legislation. And that link is in the chat as well.
And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We had a great call and we hope that you all can get involved in some of these upcoming events and tune in on Wednesday. So we like to say when we end these calls, when we organize,
we win.
Yes. And when we organize,
we
win.
Woo.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Go fight and win.